Unless you've been living in a cave, you probably know by now that the iPad goes on sale tomorrow. But the question remains, is it worth getting? We've had a pretty good look at the iPad, some of it yesterday, but we have brought our own tech gurus in today. They have not one, but two iPads. In fact, Rich Jaroslovsky, Bloomberg's technology columnist, and Erik Hesseldahl, pardon me, Erik, Bloomberg BusinessWeek's technology columnist. They're both here. They've got a couple of iPads. Gentlemen, I have to ask you the obvious question first, and then we'll start getting into the really critical reviews. Do you like it?
I found it to be very cool. I'm still getting used to it. I'm still trying to figure out how to do certain things on it, but it's very impressive.
You know what? Before I get to you, Erik, that raises an important question for me. This thing is supposed to be the simplest device you've ever tried. How is it that after playing with it for a day, and I know you spent a lot of time here on Bloomberg Television yesterday, Rich, but after playing with it for a day and probably the better part of an evening, you're still getting the hang of it?
Well, it's very much like an iPod Touch or an iPhone, and since I've used those before, I kind of know how that works. By the same token, it's a different experience. The larger screen, the apps, the larger real estate, and the way you interact with your content and your data is very different than, at least I find it very different than on the iPhone or the iPad.
That's a good comparison with the iPhone, the iPad. Erik, how does it measure up against a laptop in terms of the user experience?
Oh, it's completely different from a laptop. I mean, it's much more portable. You can move it around and reorient the screen a little bit. And you can see how it sort of changes its orientation. Well, it's not doing it now. There it is.
Right.
And you know, so that it's very different, and it's much more portable, I think, than a laptop. And so it's basically another layer of flexibility that you have with your media. You
know, everybody has been inundated with the hype surrounding the iPad, and we here on Bloomberg have probably been a bit guilty of that too, because it just is, you can't deny it, an exciting product. I read an interesting thing, though, about the iPad and about Apple, which is that Apple product, the tough thing about covering Apple products is that they come with a lot of hype. And the tough thing about covering Apple products is that sometimes the hype is true. Looking backwards, there was a lot of hype around the iPhone. Hard to say now that the hype wasn't justified. Can you cast your mind forward and look back at the iPad and tell us what we may think?
The iPhone was really, really interesting in its first iteration. It became a real phenomenon in its second iteration, and I think something similar is going to happen here. I mean, this is a fascinating and interesting product, but I can only look forward and really get excited about number 2, which I can only assume will be about a year away.
Rich, your review of the iPad, which became available, and I have been reading this morning, does identify some of the shortcomings. And I want to go into this stuff because it's not just tech junkies who are going to miss some of these things. I think I might miss some of these things. The inability to use Flash, which we're used to if you've ever used an iPod Touch or an iPhone. But not only that, the lack of a USB port on a device this large seems kind of weird. The fact that it doesn't have a camera, I can see the value of doing a video conference with that thing in your lap. How is it that Apple left these things out?
Well, it may well be that some of these things introduced a little level of extra complexity or extra cost, and they did want to keep the cost down. The base model of this is only $499, which isn't quite value priced compared to a netbook, but at least it's in the same general ballpark. So some of those things may be price considerations. Some of them also may well be control issues that Apple wants the experience to be as seamless as possible.
Like with Flash, say.
Like with Flash, and they're afraid that Flash would drain battery.
Now, Arik here is doing his best to keep this as dynamic as possible, but gentlemen, I want to challenge you with about a minute left. Show me the coolest thing you found on the iPad thus far, if you can get to it quickly.
I like.
Oh, Marvel Comics. I love this one. Okay, yeah, so give us a taste of Marvel Comics.
Yeah, this was great. I had a cold a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to look at. I felt like reading a comic book, and I just thought it was the coolest thing when I saw it yesterday.
Now, how about you, Rich? What do you like the best?
I'll be shamelessly self-promoting, and I'll say that the new Bloomberg app, which I had not a hand in doing, so.
Let's give everybody a view of this. Rich, hold it up if you will.
Sure.
This is the Bloomberg application for the iPad. I haven't seen this yet, everybody. This is what it looks like. It's obviously a lot bigger than what you get with the Bloomberg app on the the iPhone, which I suppose is the idea when you've got this 9.7-inch screen.
Yeah, very much so. And as I say, since you and I had nothing to do with doing it, I think we can be a little shameless, but it's really very nice and very interactive.
I'm afraid we have to wrap, but the one thing I'm looking forward to is once 3G comes in, maybe you can travel on the train watching Bloomberg television as part of this Bloomberg application.
Everyone will want it.
That is Rich Jaroslovsky and Erik Hesseldahl, Bloomberg and Bloomberg BusinessWeek technology columnists, with another look at the iPad. It goes on sale tomorrow.